All right, good evening for my next presentation on Facebook and YouTube. First, an explanation for the hat. I don't normally wear a hat. In fact, I rarely wear a hat unless I'm walking out in the sun. But I was told that when I do a presentation on Zoom, the glare from the bald spot on the top of my head becomes a distraction. So this pit hat is to stop that and hopefully won't be too much of a distraction. I did go to the University of Pittsburgh for my undergraduate education, which is not related to anything that follows, but it's the explanation of the hat. I also have loyalties to the University of Pennsylvania, uh, where I had additional education. All right, on to the topic. Today we're going to be talking about anti-Semitism at universities. And as a preamble, I will mention I went to a lecture 3 or 4 years ago by the head of Hillel at the University of Pennsylvania, and he said this business of anti-Semitism is overly exaggerated, that they have, many Jewish students at the University of Pennsylvania, and none of them report any significant harassment or interference with their lives or so on. And he is probably right. The problem with anti-Semitism on campus is much less physical and verbal assaults of ordinary students. Gets a little nasty if one gets into a discussion about Israel, however, or the Palestinian issue. It can get difficult. The problem has more to do with the higher structures in academia. We're talking about the professors and the administration. And there the problem is already at a level that I would state is significantly serious and probably getting more serious, not probably, it's getting more serious on a very regular basis. And there are a handful of organizations that are taking this seriously. I think that the majority of uh, intellectuals are not taking it seriously, or they're on the wrong side. And for Jews specifically, they are failing to recognize this and continue to support and donate and send their children to schools that have administrations and departments which are blatantly anti-Semitic. All right, now the format that I've chosen, primarily because I'm lazy, is to review the reading material in the order that I happen to print it out. So it will jump around a bit, sort of like a newscast might, but hopefully this will help make the point. All right, first item. Unrepentant Palestinian terrorist Leila Khalid's September 23rd virtual appearance at San Francisco State University couldn't have occurred without the steadfast report of Lynn Mahoney, SFSU's far-left virtue signaling president. All right, now this did get canceled, by the way, by Zoom and Facebook. It was on YouTube, but after 23 minutes, they pulled the plug. Now, for somebody to understand this would be like the Grand Wizard of KKK being invited to speak at an official university event. The black population would have gone crazy, and they would have been supported by every liberal person in the world. But the equivalent can happen with somebody who's anti-Semitic, and there is hardly a word spoken. I will give credit to the online agencies that pulled it, but in case you're not aware, years ago, Palestinian terrorism started out by hijacking planes, occasionally killing a passenger or two, holding them for ransom. And this went on for quite a few years. Hijacking innocent civilians, killing innocent civilians in the name of Palestinian rights, is frowned upon. They eventually stopped the procedure, I think primarily because it was producing the opposite effect that they expected. But nonetheless, somebody who supported, participated in, and advocates this type of activity of holding ordinary citizens, not even necessarily Jews or Israelis, hostage. It's unthinkable that this should occur, particularly at a university that considers itself liberal and concerned with civil and human rights. All right. Next item on this list. Jewish group speaking out about the upcoming appearance of a Rutgers University professor who's been criticized for her anti-Semitic, anti-Israel writing, also to serve as a keynote speaker at the New York State's Communication Association. The person in concern is Jasbar Puar, professor in the Department of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at the State University in Jersey. In the letter, the AJC states that Puar has sought to lend academic legitimacy to modern-day blood libel that the bodies of young Palestinians are being mined for organs for scientific research by Israel. Okay, this is a claim which is so preposterous. It is so beyond the norm, so totally without evidence or documentation. It should scare you. It should scare you that somebody, a university professor, is giving credit to that type of speech. Okay. In any case, the HAC gave your opposition to this expression that hateful and false views should not be part of university discourse. All right. Item 3, before we go on to the next page. Group of Iranian dissidents and former political prisoners demanded that Oberlin College terminate a tenured professor who formerly served as Iran's ambassador to the United States, alleging he was complicit in the regime's crimes against humanity. All right, for me, that's a little bit soft. I'm not sure how good the proof is, but it's further evidence of the fact that the universities have become a haven for people who are pro-Palestine, who are anti-Israel, and who are pro-Muslim. And I don't have a problem with anybody being pro any of those things. The problem comes when they are making unfounded accusations against Israel and blatantly teaching that at the school or welcoming it at the school. All right, let's go on. October 29th, 2020. These are all recent events. If we go back further in time, there's many, many more. Keynote speaker, New York State Communications Association Annual Convention. Anti-Semitic Rutgers University professor Jasper Puar. Okay, this is the same item, actually. She's the one that claimed that Israelis are using Palestinian organs for research. So the objection says that the agency, the communications agency, should not be a platform for politically motivated political bashing. Not only should it not be, but our universities should not be. And that's what my discussion is mainly about, that our universities widely across the country have set up platforms which allow anti-Israel bashing to occur with no balance whatsoever. On the other side, if somebody comes with any pro-Israel, there's a massive movement by the radical students to deplatform them, to cancel them, and if they're not deplatformed or canceled, they disrupt the meeting to the point where it can't be held, either live inside or outside with loudspeakers blocking it, and it's tolerated. If pro-Israel students try to do that, they would undoubtedly have the university police and the regular police haul them away. All right, more good news from our campuses. This is from September 2020. Somebody set the Chabad Center at the University of Delaware on fire. All right, they can't prove that that was anti-Semitic, but the odds are pretty high that that particular site, the Hillels, which is the Jewish student organization, the vice president and a law professor at American University, said the rise of anti-Semitic attacks on Jewish students have been coming more and more from both far right and far left. So we're objecting to, both. However, when you deal with what the administration puts up with and what the often elected student body puts up with, it focuses primarily on anti-Israel speakers and or pro right-wing speakers. All right, next item here. Okay, October 2nd. Well, this is an interesting one. This is I know Trump is a sore issue with many Americans. He's especially unpopular in the Jewish world, in spite of the fact that he's actually done more for Israel and more for Middle East peace than virtually any prior president of the country. So I have major problems with him, but I will give credit where credit's due, and that's one area that he deserves the credit. All right, this one, October 2nd, what's believed to be the first case to come up since Donald Trump's executive order last year addressing anti-Semitism on campuses. The Education Department and New York University have settled a complaint that alleged NYU hasn't done enough to prevent a hostile environment to Jews on campus. So that's a pretty strong statement that things had to be bad enough that they had to back down without quite admitting. That was originated by a complaint by I'll leave the name out, but a New York University senior alleged that she suffered 2 years of extreme anti-Semitism on the NYU campus, which created an intolerable and unlawful hostile atmosphere for Jewish students, and specifically blamed the Students for Justice in Palestine. SJP and the BDS are notoriously anti-Semitic. They flourish, or at least do reasonably well on many college campuses. They get all the benefits. They bring anti-Israel students with very little protest, and when the Jewish group tries to bring a student, they disrupt the meetings with, if not the blessing of the administration, at least no attempt to block their harassment of speakers. All right, this next one is kind of a repeat of the previous one, so we're not going to go into too much detail. It has to do with Leila Khaled, again, having no place on a college campus. And a bunch of accusations are placed against many universities by the author, Winifred Myers. I don't know enough about her. but they're encouraging people to voice objections to university leaders' willingness to host terrorist and would-be mass murderer. We offer these talking points as a guide. One, these events were not academic presentations on terrorism, but were specifically designed to whitewash terrorists' violent past. Universities forsake their mission to educate students and contribute to scholarly inquiry when they abandon all standards of civilized conduct to celebrate terrorists. All right, and the rest are details as to that one specific terrorist. A lot of good references at the end of that piece. Those of you who are on my subscription list have gotten copies of them. All right, we're getting toward the end of the list here. Another comment from the web on American colleges and universities. This one comes from the Anti-Defamation League, ADL's website. All right. It reads, it is paradoxical that the American college and university campus recently emerged as one of the major sites for the expression and dissemination of anti-Semitism. At hundreds of institutions of higher learning, the concepts of academic freedom and student activism, which parenthetically, which have been part of the Jewish success story on campus, have been invoked to shield hatred. The Nation of Islam or far-right extremists denying the existence of the Holocaust, for example, may not have had their genesis at universities, but their speakers and advertisements have found fertile ground there. All right, this is pretty shocking that Holocaust deniers can find open space on college campuses. For instance, young adults with little knowledge of the Holocaust might cast an uncritical look at a campus newspaper advertisement or a scholarly-looking text claiming to prove that the murder of 6 million Jews is a historical hoax. Many tend to treat all opinions and statements of fact as meriting equal consideration. This mindset is often encouraged by current academic vogue of deconstruction and postmodernism, which emphasize relativism and the social construction of truth. The resulting intellectual atmosphere has provided fertile ground for the airing of conspiracy theories, newly invented mythologies, and in some instances, I would be less polite and say many instances, anti-Semitic propositions. Instead of remaining a place where ideas and backgrounds mix harmoniously or at least civilly, many campuses are becoming polarized along ethnic lines, driven by suspicions. The symptoms range from acts of vandalism to hate-filled rallies to ethnic stereotypes that are tolerated in student publications. Anti-Semitic speakers continue to be invited to address campus audiences in disturbing numbers. Individuals such as the Nation of Islam's Khalid Abdul Muhammad, CNUY Professor Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Wesley Professor Tony Martin, Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, regularly include anti-Semitic statements and historical distortions in their campus speeches. Let's say this might be less of a problem if it was at least balanced, but any attempt at balanced is shut down, protested, and in some way stopped or impeded at campuses by the far left activist groups. Okay. Well, here's one. UCI. That's one university. I should know, but I don't know whether it's University of California, Irvine. I would guess. I'm not positive. UCI is not an anomaly, and the federal government has taken notice. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights conducted a study released in 2006, quite a few years ago, documenting, lamenting, and calling for action to battle with it termed an alarming proliferation of anti-Semitism on college campuses. Right, that's 2006. It is not better from 2016. It is not better in 2020. This has gotten progressively worse and worse. And I do hope people wake up about this. before it moves smoothly into the rest of society, which is what it's destined to do, even though you may look upon this and say, oh, this is no big deal. These professors teach hundreds of students. Those hundreds of students affect thousands of their students or associates when they get into the world, and those thousands will affect hundreds of thousands, and before you know it, we have a strong anti-Semitic country here, which is something that almost nobody should want, except for vicious anti-Semites now. All right. Yeah, another episode in Colorado. They had to investigate whether one of the professors there was providing support to a Palestinian terrorist. That may overlap with some of what we had before. Okay. And problem again with the pro-Islamic nature of our faculty and administration. This came from one of the, now this was the Iranian Islamic Council was protesting the arms embargo on Iran. And they have, pro-Iranian, pro-Muslim, anti-Israel professors, members of the boards of trustees of university, which is what the complaint is here at Stanford, that Lily Sarafan started a 6-year term on the board of trustees in spite of her being pro-Iranian advocate, and we're talking about their present Iranian regime. Okay, and we have another SFSU professor who'd been embroiled in numerous lawsuits and anti-Zionist campaigns, who told her class that she wanted to become another Leila Khalid, in other words, another Palestinian terrorist. Okay, good examples. More good news. An American academic has claimed the Israeli government's treatment of Palestinians follows a theory set out by Nazi jurist Carl Schmitt. Okay, the attempt to link Israel with Nazism is so far off base, it requires another half-hour to hour lecture. So we're not going to deal on that in detail, but they said that somebody spoke at the Oriental and African Studies group. This is a professor of Rutgers who essentially did the speaking. Linking Israeli and even American behavior towards blacks as being like Nazis. Someone once said that if you have to involve Nazis in your argument, you've lost the argument before you start. I think there's a lot of truth to that. All of these arguments are way off base. Okay. Yeah, the claims go from silly to ridiculous that Israelis train American police to oppress blacks in America. There's no end to it. But again, my beef is not that people aren't allowed to have diverse attitudes. People are allowed to be anti-Israel. They're even allowed to be anti-Semitic in the United States. But universities should not be the place that fosters these opinions. They should not be the place that allows them to go unchallenged. It should not be the place which deplatforms people who want to speak up for the opposite. So that's it. That's all the news from Lake Wobegon, as they used to say. It's 8:05. I'm not sure how long I've been rambling on here. 25 minutes. All right, that's not too bad. I'll say good night to everybody, and I'll see you for my next rant